The Football Show on Off the Ball.
With Sky. Watch every live Premier League game this season on Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.
I'm prepared to do anything I can to play for my country again.
Do it then.
What about your start to the game?
It wasn't bad, was it?
Why should an honest answer be a mistake?
How can a modern day manager not have a mobile phone?
Why should he?
Welcome along, Football Show coming at you. Pat Nevin is with us. Good evening, hello.
Good evening, how are you doing, Joe?
Yeah, very well, very well. Champions League knockout stages draw has been made. Liverpool, Real Madrid. Chelsea, I know you were at Stamford Bridge yesterday. Chelsea have Dortmund. Spurs have Serie A champions AC Milan. Man City, they are rewarded for cruising through the group stages. They get Leipzig. Bayern Munich punished for cruising through the group stages. They get PSG. So that will all happen on the 14th and 21st of February. And then Europa League. I guess a glamour tie, but probably a moment where both clubs reflect on where they once were. Barcelona against Manchester United catches the eye in the Europa League. So I guess Liverpool, Real Madrid is the one that jumps out. I did hear, and it was from a Liverpool fan, admittedly, potentially clutching at straws, but I did hear the theory that Liverpool are playing better against better teams right now, so maybe this is no bad thing.
They would change it if they could, let's be fair. It wasn't the one they wanted. But it's not impossible. I mean, Liverpool on their day, and they had, they've had periods when they've been on their day. Certainly against Spurs, there was certainly periods, although they did get a lot of help there. It should be it's a glamour tie, it's a cracker of a tie. Real Madrid won't fancy it either. They wouldn't want that either. But then Real Madrid were in the position of, they had quite a few ties that they could have got that were bad. But now there's always one that lands not well. The four teams, you look at Chelsea got lucky. Spurs got mega lucky. I know it sounds, AC Milan, wow. No, that's not the same Milan. Absolutely not. And Spurs are well capable of doing that. And I really do feel they're kind of dark horses to go quite far in that tournament. Spurs, I don't know what their odds are just now. Not to win it, but maybe to get to the final. Honestly, I'd be looking there. I know that sounds really odd to say, but there's this strange thing going on with Spurs. I was over in Marseille last week to see them play, and they played terrible in the first half, but really well in the second half. The point is, see when they've got everybody fit, particularly, Kulusevski's come back now, that makes a difference. Son's going to be a wee while, but he'll be back round about the time of those games coming up. They've got Richarlison, he'll be coming back as well, and they've got Kane. And because they've got that far, and they've got in the Champions League, they'll buy some more players as well. So watch out for them. So I think that's a brilliant draw for Spurs, and I think they'll be delighted. And of course, Man City, Leipzig, that's a cracker of a draw for them. So yeah, the one that sticks out is Liverpool. I'm going to wait because I keep on seeing Liverpool, and then after I see them, I think, right, I know what I'm thinking about them now, and then they change again. They have a stinker, they have a cracker. At the start of the season, I saw them 9-0 winners and thought, oh, they're back. And then they had a stinker. You think, well, wait a minute, I want to look at this. So I'm going to see them this weekend coming as well. So we have a real good look at, if it's just, are they being the flat track bullies, or are they actually quite capable of, beating the good teams, as you say, that their fans feel they are.
Spurs and Liverpool, two of the more interesting teams just now, so we might hone in on that game yesterday. Andrei Shevchenko gave an amazing interview yesterday in the Sunday Times to David Walsh, and it was wide-ranging, but ultimately focused on the situation in Ukraine, and he was remembering coming home from a football tournament as a 14-year-old from Moscow in 1991, and when he left, he was in the USSR, and when he came home, train station, it was Ukraine, and there were flags being waved, and talked about even for the Euro 2000 qualifiers, I hadn't remembered, but they had to sleep in the Ukrainian embassy in Moscow because they weren't considered safe. And he was talking about the current conflict, and his mother's health has rapidly declined with the stress of everything, and eventually after sleeping and fearing rocket strikes every night, they've managed to get the family out, and they're in Italy. Anyway, that's a roundabout mention. It's worth reading that piece. But David Walsh seemed to meet Shevchenko at Wentworth Golf Club, where Harry Kane was. And Shevchenko said to Kane, it must have been after the Marseille game, well done last night, got the win, great stuff. And Kane said, you should have seen us in the first half. And that notion, you should have seen us in the first half, that could pretty much, that could pretty much sum up the Spurs season thus far. Small enough sample size, but in their last 6 games, they've conceded the first goal in the first half. They have scored 3 goals in the first half. They scored 11 in the second half. They seem, and this is the Conte question, they seem to be coming out of the traps in the braced position as opposed to in the try to win the game position.
They seem to be playing, and Marseille was a classic example of it. I think they play Conte-like when they come out. They're very safe, they're very secure, they're quite defensive and negatively minded. They lose a goal and then they become Spurs. And he allows them to become Spurs. I mean, I couldn't believe how, I was going to say how long it took Conte to change it. Conte couldn't change it. He was sitting beside us up in the stands in Marseille. But it took the entire half, and they could have been out of it. They could have been finished. But they came out starting the second half, changed the system, little tweaks here and there. But that's all it needed. And I'm being surrounded by this at the moment. Everywhere I go, I'm seeing teams that are desperate to play 3 at the back. And then when it's not working, changing it. I mean, Chelsea do seem to do it all the time. But it happened in like game after game that I went to. I was at the Man United, Chelsea-Man United game. They had a 3 at the back, Chelsea, and went to 4 and got better. Spurs did the same, went to 4 and got better. Chelsea at Brighton, they were 3 at the back. I was going to say 5 at the back. They weren't. They were 3 at the back. There was nobody else there. And they changed at half-time, and they were better. It's really weird. You know, like, they're desperate as if not to go for this 3/5 at the back. But as soon as it seems to be failing, you go a goal behind, you think, oh, sorry, I'm going to go and attack then. I'll go and allow another player in midfield. And it's one of those ones where it was the fashion for a while and it was working quite well for a while. But see, when you look at it now, it's just not there. It's not there. It used to work. Conte used to win leagues with that system. You know, there's lots of managers that have done well with it, right? But look at it now. It's basically 4-3-3. Yeah, everyone's doing a version of 4-3-3, and it's being successful. So I think it's the Conte's trying to make them the Conte team that he wants, but it doesn't suit them. And then they get let off the leash and off they go, and they're much, much better. And
so does Conte just have to face the writing on the wall here?
I actually do suspect. Now, Conte actually did quite a few times. I remember him changing it in various teams that he's been at, and he has gone 4 at the back. It's not his favourite, but he has done it sometimes. But he only does it when he completely trusts his centre halves, and he doesn't, obviously.
Okay.
Clearly,
for obvious reasons, yesterday.
Well, for very, very obvious reasons. So if you've got 2 centre backs, and they're really good, you trust them. Yeah, go for it. And it's really nice to see that. I watched Leicester the other day doing that really well, just saying no, we kind of like what we've got here. We believe in these 2 at the back, and you know, and kind of left them 2v2. You know, the way Liverpool used to do it quite a lot with Van Dijk and Matip or whoever, which they can't really do as much just now. So I think Conte will do that, but he will be scouring the planet to get the right centre back in the January transfer window. And if he does that, I think that opens up an absolute box of chocolates for him. Yeah. Because then he can get one more attack-minded player on that pitch and suddenly they're a different team.
On 5-3-2 generally, so I was listening to Gary Neville talking after the game yesterday, and he was on firmer footing here talking 5-3-2 than beIN Sports in Qatar, I would say, and Ian Hislop was nowhere to be seen. So he was making the point that even as a player, his favourite system at Old Trafford to play against was 5-3-2. He said, we saw that coming, we rubbed our hands, it was so simple. Beckham and Giggs pinned back their full-backs, their wing-backs, and with only 3 players in their midfield, they could never cover the width of the pitch. So either me or Dennis Irwin, always the outball. And I remember even making this point last season when Man City played Manchester United and Cancelo had about 1,000 touches because United went 5-3-2 and surrendered the pitch. And so again yesterday, he was looking at that game and he said, Andy Robertson realised straight away, this is the game. You know, they're pinned back. I'm going to have so much space. So there is obviously a really inherent weakness in that 5-3-2 system that you're kind of giving the game to the fullbacks. And I would kind of think, well, geez, if there's 2 fullbacks I don't want to give the game to, it's probably Robertson and Alexander-Arnold. So my question is, what's Conte thinking there?
Well, there is no correct system. This is the thing, right? There is, because if you're playing, say, 4-3-3 or whatever, or diamond, whatever, against that, right, you have got one strength, but you better make sure you've got good or your best or better players in those positions. Because if you don't, you actually then will lose it again. It can be twisted on top of you. So if you've got fullbacks that aren't great at crossing the ball, which, to be fair, not all of them are. We think of the ones that are great. Then you get the ball there, you think, fine, have it. You're not great at it. You're not going to cause us that much problem. We've got another centre-back in there. We'll deal with that all day long. And that's the kind of thinking. I played for years 5-3-2 with the Scottish national team. That was always a system that they played, and they thought that was positive. And I understand, we think about it, good managers in that situation, if they are wedded to it, they just make it 5-4-1, and then you've got two are wide and kill off those defenders coming in. So, but it's tiny wee change like that. You make it 5-4-1, you bring somebody back into midfield, then the two wide midfielders kill that space that you're talking about, right? So it's an arms race. It's always an arms race, right? And there's never ever a simple one. That's why, oddly enough, of all people, Potter's the one I find dead interesting just now, because he changes it all the time, every single game, and every single system, because he's reacting to all the systems. And that's great as long as you're winning. But if you're not, it's a classic, you don't know your best team. So if you know something that's worked for you, and everybody, and I don't care what your business is, you could be a commentator, a footballer, you can work in carpentry. If you know what has worked for you for 10 years, you tend to kind of like it, and you stick with it, and you know its strengths. You then go out of that comfort zone. They all know the different systems, but they know what has worked for them really well. And it has. It's worked for Conte. And he'd rather not go out of it, but I suspect that he knows he probably has to. But he'll only do it, A, when he's pushed, which is when you're a goal down or so, or B, when he's got centre-backs in where he can think, yeah, I've got the ones I want, I can leave that now. Yeah,
well, we'll watch that dynamic. I mean, it is quite interesting when a year on from taking the job, they're now Champions League knockout stages as opposed to Europa League conference, and their top four credentials look sound, and he's getting booed at half time. So to be continued. Kulusevski back, it feels big there. Big win for Liverpool as well. You know, suddenly they're within 7 points of the top four with a game in hand. Are there signs of real life there, or are still as unsure as ever about Liverpool at the moment?
You don't rule them out. You can't rule them out from getting top four. Yeah, and I wouldn't for a second. I think it's going to be tough, but it's going to be tough for everybody else. I mean, is anyone else, apart from Arsenal, who we could go into in a moment, I'm sure, apart from Arsenal and Manchester City, there isn't really anyone else. Spurs are a bit up and down, but because they've got Conte there, they'll almost certainly grind it out. And I've felt that since the start of the season, and I've kind of still not changed with that. For whatever ups and downs there are, and you know, it can be a bit cringy at sometimes when you think, oh, don't be so negative, mate. You know, you are third in the league. You are, doing well in the Champions League. But the other position, Man United keep going around. Newcastle are absolutely capable of carrying on what they're doing just now, because what they've got behind them just now is fantastic. And of course, they are going to be stronger probably after the transfer window as well. So for Liverpool, they're capable of doing it. It's not a stick on, but it wouldn't surprise you in the slightest if they could go on a little bit of a run now. They got a bit of help at the weekend there, without a doubt. But I think if they can put away, it's Southampton next week, if we can put them away and go into the break and maybe only 3-ish points off it, I think they can be really quite comfortable, come back. Remember, a number of their players won't be at the World Cup.
Yeah.
There are some players, some teams that are going to be wrecked by the World Cup. I'm not sure they're going to be as bad.
Which was your favourite Salah goal?
The second dink, obviously. The dink's better.
Yeah, Pat Nevin loved a dink.
I do. You set me up for that one. You absolutely set me up for that. Actually, fun enough, before we go any further, we need just one thing I want to mention to you. I think it was you, and my apologies if it wasn't you a few weeks ago. I told you about a player who was my new kind of favourite-ish player, and I said I'd only seen him for 20 minutes. And it's the lad Matoma down at Brighton. I don't know if you've seen him yet. He scored with a header at the back post, but they did an analysis this week finally on him in Match Day Day, and I think it was Danny that did it. And honestly, I think they've figured it out now. I'd only seen it for 20 minutes, but just the movement, he was doing things that very few others have done for many, many years. Vision on the ball. He played this beautiful ball, even was it 2 weeks ago, the Chelsea Brighton game, where everyone talked about the brilliant finish, and I'm thinking that pass that he just played there, if De Bruyne plays it, you'd go wow. So definitely, I mean, I don't need to say keep your eye on Mitoma because everyone knows now, but I mentioned him after 20 minutes and I talked to a Japanese journalist. I was so interested in him. I talked to a Japanese journalist who said he's technically the best player we've ever produced.
Wow.
And I'm like, I thought it was quite good. So we'll see if he carries on. He looks to me as if he's extra special.
So Stamford Bridge yesterday, you were there for the Arsenal game. Being at the ground, I mean, it's been the most extraordinary 12 months there. I wouldn't be surprised if the fan base and just the club at large is almost trying to catch up with where they find themselves. Anything different in the atmosphere, the general mood music around the club that strikes you?
It's quite confused, I think. I would say that much.
Yeah.
With Tuchel, they didn't expect him to go. He was much loved. They kind of like, Graham Potter. They like him as a bloke. You can't not like him as a bloke because he's so honest. There are concerns. There's doubt. No doubt there's concerns. But every single fan base has concerns about every single manager. He is talking about bigger picture, taking a step back, looking at it. It's going to take a while. And the Americans are very, very keen to say, look, they're going to do it their own way. And even from tiny things from inside the club, they are very, very noticeably going to do it very, very differently. If that very, very differently goes on to the level of if Graham Potter finishes mid-table, are they going to stick by him? I don't know the answer to that. I really don't know the answer to that.
Because that's the claim they made at the start of the season in very well-briefed pieces, that we are going for a more holistic approach. And if you thought we sacked Tuchel and that was, this is a continuation of the ruthless Abramovich approach, it's not that. We've identified a holistic manager who's going to build a culture, and he is going to survive if they don't make the top four. That line was in the piece, and it was very clearly in there, and I still don't know if I believe them.
Time will tell.
Yeah.
I mean, they've said it. They've clearly said it. It is very, very hard to do that if there is a dip, and there's every possibility. It could be because Chelsea were hammered 1-0 by Arsenal.
Right.
Arsenal were the better side by a long, long way. They created very, very little. There was a real lack of energy in the group, and Arsenal just looked fantastic. I mean, all over the pitch, worked great. Players who you thought were okay before, like Xhaka, looks like I'm not going to say world class, and he just looks like a very, very good player now, right? But Partey, he was immense. He just destroyed that midfield there. And anywhere, I mean, he read the game beautifully as well, and just all over the place they look younger and livelier. And it's just a thing you see with a team now and again. You think, you looked a wee bit leggy there, that as a group. And it goes away sometimes. We've watched Liverpool going through this, and they sometimes come out the other end of it. But you're watching Arsenal now, and there's been a couple of little dips. I was at their game against Leeds a couple of weeks ago, and they had a terrible second half. But they still seem to be able to drag it through. But as for Chelsea, it's going to be one incredibly interesting period. They're dying for this World Cup. They're the only people I know who are now happy that the World Cup's happening in the middle of the season. They need this break because he's going to have a period of time, Potter. He's not really had time to really get his head up because of a game every 3 days.
Yeah.
I think he'll make a load of changes in January. I mean, a lot of changes in January. I think a lot of people will go out. Maybe even some big names will go. And he'll bring a good number of them, new names in. He's also got that other thing that people do forget. I mean, they've got N'Golo Kante, who's been out for a while. I mean, what a miss that guy is. But the big thing, you take out Reece James of that team and you take out Chilwell. It happened to them last season. They were brilliant with them two in the team. They got injured and it was a lesser season. Exactly the same thing's happened again with both of them. And they are, I know they're full-backs or wing-backs, but they are unbelievably important to what Chelsea create. So will they stick by the manager? Well, we'll find out because it gets tough, and it gets particularly tough if the fans do turn on the ownership. And by the way, Chelsea fans generally don't do that. They really generally don't do that. But if they did turn on the ownership, then the manager won't last. So if I'd really stick my neck out, I think he'll last. I think they'll stick with him. I don't know. I'm like you. I'm not convinced. I'm not sure. But if I had to, put a bet on it one way or the other, I think they'd stick on with him if he was 5th, 6th, 7th, in the hope that he does build that thing next year. After 2 years, I'm not so sure.
Yeah.
But I think he'll stick longer than most managers get.
Arsenal, looking at the fixture list, are likely going to re-emerge on Stephen's Day as top of the table Arsenal. So nobody saw that coming start of the season. When they click, they're beautiful. And there's a resilience about them now that maybe people didn't think they had. It does look, though, like beyond their first 11, 12, there's a real drop-off. How sustainable is it for those 11 to keep going?
I love they always ask the questions that we don't set this up, by the way. I was kind of hoping you'd ask that question.
Okay. But it is the only question. I mean, I wouldn't take too much credit. It is the only question in Arsenal right now, because I think that 11 have proven themselves.
Right, so one, you got to get a wee bit lucky with injuries. You look around and a lot of other teams have had a lot bigger problems over, Liverpool went through a terrible time of injuries a while back. Even Chelsea have, as I say, the Fofanas and all the rest of it. Yeah, less so with Arsenal. But they're a bit younger, generally. And it does make a massive difference. They have had a couple. And then, of course, when he's had to think outside the box, playing those 4 centre-backs along the back line, that's actually really, well, for a while he's got Zinchenko back in there now, but that's quite outside the box thinking from him, because that's not how a Pep team would play. They wouldn't just put 4 big centre-backs there. He wouldn't consider that. And I don't think he likes doing that, and he liked doing that, but he didn't have Tierney fully fit. He didn't have Zinchenko, so he put Tomiyasu in there at left full-back, and it kind of worked for him, but he's got quite good cover there. But I do think it's old-fashioned stuff. They finally got a couple of good centre-backs. I mean, how long have they been shouting and bawling for that? But then you look further forward, and the creative players in general, they're young. They're young. They don't get injured as much. And they don't lose energy as much. And they are able to play at that extraordinary tempo. And they honestly, as I said, they made Chelsea look really leggy, really... Old is pushing it a bit, but they looked older, a lot older than that Arsenal team. And that was the entire game. And I expected some sort of drop-off by the end of the game. Didn't happen, really, for Arsenal. Just kept on that pace up, that closing people down, high up the pitch. Manchester City, when they are at the best, do exactly the same. And that youth will do that. When one or two... Here's a question for you. Who's the one they can't afford to lose? I was thinking about this as well. I don't know. I honestly don't know. There was times as, if you lose Odegaard or, if you lose Partey or Martin. It's not. I don't actually think there is one that they can't afford to lose, because it is a group thing. Absolutely is a group thing.
That said, Odegaard's pretty special.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned him first.
He really is.
A lovely player. I mean, certain players, you just watch them and they cruise. I watched him, and I watched Madison at the weekend for Leicester. And I got a stitch up in the British newspapers last week, another one of them ones, where they printed something that I didn't actually say. And that used to annoy me, but it doesn't bother me anymore, because there was a grain of truth in it. And the grain of truth was, I'd said, I was talking about Raheem Sterling, and he's just not playing well. Yeah. And you can't pretend he is. And I was talking on the BBC, and then it was lifted, and by the time it got to the newspaper, it was gone through 3 different versions. It was now, I'm calling for him not to go to the World Cup, right? I don't care who goes to the World Cup. I'm Scottish. So, and that's the way it's. You look at it and think, Madison, would you take him before Raheem? Maybe.
On the basis of this weekend, for sure. What is the deal with Sterling this season?
I thought he was the best player Chelsea had at the start. Really, really good, lively, sharp. He's been playing out of position. I feel rotten for him, because he's been asked to do a wing-back position. So he's getting the ball. See, when you get the ball and you've got 30 yards to go, it's great. See, when you get a ball and you get 70 yards to go, it's hard. And I feel really, really bad for him, because he actually gets more abuse than just about any other player I know, or has over the years. And I love his attitude generally, and he keeps on coming back. And he's actually, although he looks lightweight, he's strong personality as well. So I'm desperate for him to do well, and it's nothing got to do with him playing with Chelsea or whoever he plays with or England. It doesn't matter. I really want him to do well, but you can't pretend someone's doing well when they're not. So I would have to add on top of it, he doesn't look confident. There are players, and I've never quite understood this, and I really haven't understood it. I can hardly remember ever happening when I've got on the ball and I'm an attacking wide player and I don't think I can do you. I don't care who you are. I just never felt it. Now, I might not be able to get by you, but I think I can, and I will have a go. And then I've watched a number of players, and it's happening with Raheem now. He doesn't look as if he wants to do it. He'll play the simple ball. He'll just take the foot off the gas and pass it back or pass it sideways. Remember, I used to watch, there was Callum Hudson-Odoi used to do it for a while, and was thinking, it doesn't matter. Go at him 5 times, you only need to get by once.
Yeah.
Make a goal. You won. It's really simple odds. They're all in your favour, so don't stop doing it. Just keep on doing it until eventually it comes off, and keep on trying. But see, when you stop trying, then there's no point in really pushing it, or having you there instead of someone like Maddison or Grealish or whatever, because they're trying it, and they will have a go. So I'd kind of stitched up as if I was having a go at Raheem. I wasn't, and afterwards I'm thinking, please score. And other people will have thought, have a nightmare, so I'm proved right. No, please score. Please do something well. But it's just not quite happening for the lad, and I feel really bad for him. But you look at someone like Saka, who's playing, or a whole bunch of players at say Crystal Palace or Matoma. They all just go at people, don't they?
Yeah.
Got to do it. You got to do it if you're in that position. Because if you're not doing it, A, somebody else will, or B, you might as well just go and get some big lump who's a big guy you can get in the back post there, because they need to add something.
Well, it's you got to buy a lottery ticket, and it's what we were saying about Grealish early in the season. He seems to have started to go at people a bit more. We're going to take a very short break. Pat's down with us. Our football show coverage brought to you by Sky. Watch all the football you love, including the biggest Premier League games every weekend live on Sky. Back in 1 sec.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky. Watch Premier League, Women's Super League, EFL, Scottish Premiership and much more. Live only on Sky Sports.
This is News Talk. Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky. Watch Premier League, Women's Super League, EFL, Scottish Premiership and much more. Live only on Sky Sports.
This is News Talk.
Now you're welcome back. Pat and Nevin is still with us. We are turning our attention to, well, in due course we'll come to Villa Park, but first, Newcastle are third in the table. Southampton 1, Newcastle 4. Ralph Hasenhüttl has been unceremoniously sacked. 4 years in the job, so he had a good innings, and he is managerial casualty number 5 of the season thus far in the Premier League. Scott Parker, that feels like about 5 years ago, but Scott Parker, Thomas Tuchel, of course, Bruno Lage, Steven Gerrard, now Ralph Hasenhüttl is gone. 4 years in charge. His points per game has halved, really, since March of this year. He's taken half the number of points from 26 games that he had taken in the previous 26 games. So, went off a cliff a touch. I mean, the striking thing about Hasenhüttl, Pat, is that 3 of his staff were sacked against his wishes not so long ago. I mean, that is almost tantamount to constructive dismissal. Like the writing was on the wall there, and they've let the thing linger on a touch. So, what do we say of Hasenhüttl and his managerial stint at Southampton?
It seems like a hell of a long time, doesn't it? To actually last that. Remember, he survived that 9-0. And considering the limited funds that Southampton have got in comparison with others, he kind of, in times gone by, they thought, only about 4-ish years. That's not like, in the Premier League, that's absolutely amazing for any team out with, a team that's winning things all the time. So he's done an incredible job. Remember, they are in the Premier League. They are actually there. They're one of, when you start looking at the numbers, the teams that are highly unlikely to go down. So is it 6 or 8? 6 certainly, but maybe 8 are highly unlikely to go down most seasons, right?
Yeah.
So your percentage chances of going down each season are really quite high. whoever you are, because someone's going to go down. And 3 out of that group below are going to go down, and you keep away from it. And especially if you're a club with more limited finances. I think he did a pretty decent job going that far, but they just crept into the relegation places there. And as soon as they crept into it, I think they were waiting. I think you're spot on. I think they realised that it's going to be a danger all season, and they just want to lift the place again. And that's sometimes what these clubs do. All right, lift it a wee bit, we'll bring somebody else in and change it. It doesn't always make the greatest of differences, but I don't think the Southampton fans will be, crying painful tears over it for a huge, long time, because they would much rather not be in this position. But I think he can actually walk away with his head held pretty high.
Yeah, okay. Nathan Jones from Luton is who Southampton have identified. And to be fair, they do have a track record of picking out some good managers, so we'll watch that space.
The reason why they did it, you're absolutely right. They were going to get rid of him. He was going. But what they had to do is isolate him a little bit so that and they had to go and have time to go and find the next guy. And while they're doing that and figuring it out and know who they want to walk in, by the time he's really fed up, it's an easy job. He wants out. He's desperate to get out because he's been left isolated. So no, I know why he did it. It's quite
brutal.
Impressive.
Newcastle third. So this is pretty impressive, really. Jack Grealish has given the kiss of life to Almiron, and all around him, Eddie Howe seems to have the Midas touch. It's quite interesting. The discussion around Newcastle over the last while has been, is this Eddie Howe has done a really good job, or is this down to spending €250 million? And of course, the answer is both. You get on either front. If one's not working, then the other doesn't negate that. So I think Howe is doing a good job. The whole thing leaves me cold, I have to say. I found what's happened here an absolute scandal. But you have to acknowledge that they have spent the money, considerably large amount of it. They've spent it well, and Howe is getting things working for these new arrivals and some who were there before and weren't playing very well. So they kind of in year one here, full year of the Saudis, they look like a really good chance to finish top four. This thing is moving fast.
Yeah, right. We all know the caveats that you always have to say. So you've said them also. Yeah, we get that. The other stuff is, he played Longstaff in the midfield during the game there. I mean, yes, they spent a lot of money, but Willock is playing there. And Almiron, he couldn't hit a barn door with a banjo.
Yeah.
Honestly, all these things, you think you have to take all those, and it's the manager's done a really good job of putting it all together. Yes, he spent money. Guimaraes, he's special, yeah, and you have to spend money for that. But Sam Maximin was already there, and he's not even starting all the games at the moment. It feels like the beginning, but it feels like he's miles ahead of schedule. And I honestly didn't think they would be close to the top four this season. And I don't think many Newcastle fans thought that as well. But I suppose it helps when you're playing along with good players, and the manager's got to take a big part of the credit for it, because I do think when you get, Almiron is one of those players, kind of players, dare I say it, that I really like, but it's not, you just never think it's going to happen for, because they're lovely to watch and they've got nice skills, but you need that devilment. And honestly, it's extraordinary to see it. And I don't know if it was Grealish, but the timing was quite funny, isn't it?
Oh, listen.
It's absolutely hilarious. And I don't think anyone feels anything other than delighted for Almiron in this one. And, I'm really happy for him, because the other thing is that smells ridiculous. That smells just hilarious. So you just love to see it. You love to see all the players that they've got doing well, but making other choices like Byrne at fullback. That's an Eddie Howe call. It's a big Eddie Howe call. And thinking, these things make sense now, but they wouldn't necessarily have made sense before. But he knows how to work it. He knows how to get the best out of players. And it's just the start of something that's going to be, without even a shadow of a doubt, exceptional, on the field. For all we say of where the money's come from, whatever, I have to say I'm so happy for the Newcastle fans. The nearest team to me, they have put up with such a lot of garbage for so long. I go back to Kevin Keegan's time there, And the teams they had, I remember playing against them, and they had Keegan, they had Chrissy Waddle, they had Gaza coming through, and you're looking at them thinking, wow, that is amazing. But it never happens. It just never happens. They never win anything. And suddenly you think, this is it. They're finally, after sticking by their team for all these decades, they're very, very close to it. They'll win something fairly soon, the next couple of years. Don't know what it'll be, but they'll win something. So I'm just happy for them, guys. And girls.
Aston Villa did a number on Manchester United, the 1995 Don't Win Anything with Kids last time that they beat United Villa Park. It was just extraordinary. That's a long time ago. You just would have thought somewhere along the way they might have beaten them, but no, in the league. Unai Emery was talking about how he's a big Peaky Blinders fan, so he's finding the accent manageable, which is genuinely, he's like, yeah, it's made life much easier. So I don't know, how much credit do you give Unai Emery for what they produced, I wonder?
I think you have to wait, because remember, United can be so incredibly up and down as well. He did adapt it and change it a little bit, and players get a lift, and they've had a wee lift. They've definitely had a little lift since Gerrard's gone. You can see there's a wee bit more belief about the group. I've no idea why that is. I would love to talk to those players and see why that is, because I just always thought most people kind of liked and worked well with Steven Gerrard, but it might have been that simple thing. It looks from the outside that the Mings thing that happened might have upset the camp a little bit, and you can't upset the camp with these sorts of things. But the one thing about Steven Gerrard, his standards were so high for himself all the way through his career, and I don't mean that in a kind of glib, bland way. Oh, he was a great player and all that. No, he hated himself when he'd done something wrong. He absolutely punished himself. He pushed himself further than almost any player I know, and he was one of the best players in the world of his generation. And he wants to be exactly the same way as a manager. And some people can't stick with that.
Yeah.
Or take it the wrong way.
I think you're onto something there. A very weighed down character, I would say, Steven Gerrard. And maybe that's tough to be around as a leader. Yeah,
it is. 'Cause there's not that much smiling. He's likeable.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of smiling, and there's not a lot of a buzz. As you'd say in the football world, being a buzz around the place. You like the place being light and fun, and everyone just kind of like releasing you. And they had a lot of players that look capable of being attack-minded or being, having good vision, but they didn't look as if they were off the leash. They didn't look light. They didn't look comfortable with it. And then as soon as Stevie's gone, that's suddenly allowed. And it's a real. I don't think that's an abuse of Stevie Gerrard. That's a guy who, look, I cannot give anything other than the standards that I worked by. That's who I am. But maybe everyone else doesn't work that way.
No.
And I think also generationally it's quite different. There's certain generations that don't want to hear that all the time. They don't want to get that all the time. I don't want to abuse an entire generation. It's not like that, obviously. But there is the levels of mollycoddling have with some players just push through the roof with one or two, and you need to be able to manage all types now. And maybe Stevie wasn't capable of doing that to the level he needed to.
Slightly ashen-faced Luke Shaw was interviewed afterwards, and he said, look, we knew they'd come out all guns firing, there'd be a lot of emotion, new manager, enthusiasm, and then he sort of trailed off because knowing it is one thing and doing nothing about it is another. So the team selection was also much discussed. Garnacho got the nod after his performance midweek in Europe. Danny van de Beek, out of nowhere, in you go. Just his fourth Premier League start for Manchester United. Ronaldo captains the side. I mean, this was a curious little move in the Ten Hag tenure based on the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. A little sign that I'm not convinced worked. It's kind of odd, though, because you're watching it, and if I'm Cristiano, if I try and be Cristiano for a moment, I'm thinking, great, I'm up front. I'm a skipper. It's a big, what? With Van de Beek and Garnacho? What? I want the strongest, most powerful, hardest working team around with everybody, and Bruno wasn't there, obviously. I think he wasn't unavailable. So it kind of was, he must have thought, thanks. You throw, and of course the manager wasn't throwing that one in, but that must have felt really quite bad for Cristiano Ronaldo. There is that other thing where I know Rashford, I actually think is a slightly better player wide, attacking from wide, but you almost guess he wants to be the striker. He wants to be the main man. When he is the main man, he loves it, and he'll work hard, and he just looks like a different player when he's up there, battling against people, running beyond them, and he just looks a player you enjoy seeing. But when he's moved out wide and Cristiano's up there, he's just a lesser figure. Yeah. And whether it's inside his head, and he said recent interviews he's been saying that his head wasn't in a good place for quite a long time. Yeah, really, Sherlock? I think we all knew that. Yeah. We could see it a mile away. I remember the day I first saw it was Crystal Palace a couple of years ago, and his body language horrendous. I was actually worried about him. I was really quite concerned about his mental health. I was worried in case he was getting a wee bit depressed, because footballers suffer from depression. I was that concerned about him. But it wasn't that, and I think he just would like to be the main man. And he said himself he was down. But when he's moved back out and Cristiano's given the armband, he must think, oh, am I not going to be? Am I never going to be the main man? Yeah. And I think he wants it.
And look, I mean, he had an incredibly difficult, traumatic summer as well. So you don't know really what's going on with anybody. On Manchester United generally, the last time they scored 3 goals in the league was against Man City. They don't score very many goals at the moment under Ten Hag. 1 against Villa, 1 against Sociedad, 1 against West Ham. It got them the win. 1 against Chelsea in that draw. They did score 2 against Spurs. Didn't score in that 0-0 draw at Newcastle. 1 against Omanoia before that. They got 2 against Everton at Goodison back at the start of October, and they did score 3 against Omanoia and Man City in that week. But they're kind of a 1 to 2 goal team at the moment.
Yeah. And there'll be Manchester United fans listening, and my apologies if I get this wrong, but was it United that started the attack? Yeah. It's where I heard it most.
Well, it's the reason Conte wasn't deemed a good enough fit for United,
Exactly. So that seems, it's the DNA. Right? It absolutely is the DNA. But it doesn't feel like the group, the team. But you can't do it if you've not got the personnel who are set up to do it. Shaw was always one of, oddly enough, you've got a striker and you've got 3 attacking midfielders behind him. Behind that, you've got Casemiro and Eriksen, and at their very best, they are among the most fabulous players you'll see. I don't think they can do it every week, quite to that level at the age that they're at, although both still extremely good. But sometimes it does come from other areas, like the fullbacks, and Shaw isn't raiding quite the way he did when he was much younger. He's more uncertain about that. Dalot, I have to say, I think he's brilliant.
He's good, yeah.
Oh, what a player. I mean, what a player. But, how much creation from that sort of area. And that's kind of, in the game the way it is at the moment, you're needing that from those wide areas. So you're wanting those guys to fly beyond the fullbacks time and time again. They're kind of wingers or wide midfielders time and time again. And the times I've seen them, and I've not seen all the games this season, I have to admit, they've not been doing it anywhere near enough for them to be a team that can attack. So, yeah, I understand the other thing is there was so much dependent on Cristiano Ronaldo's goals last season, and if he's not playing as well, not playing as often, or the classic chicken and egg thing, you play him to score a goal, but you still might not win because the work rate's going to be down. It's a hard one to get round, and I think in the end Ten Hag will have to get round it, and one of the things will be get round it without Cristiano Ronaldo. That will have to be one of the things.
Pat, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much.
Speak to you soon.
Cheers. Pat and Nevin with us on this Monday evening, and our football show coverage is brought to you by Sky. You can watch all the football you love, including the biggest Premier League games every weekend, live on Sky.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky. Watch Premier League, Women's Super League, EFL, Scottish Premiership and much more. Live only on Sky Sports.
This is News Talk.